Hello and welcome to the Legend Sport channel. I'm Joe. Today we're going to continue our series on how to create a fictional league in OOTP Baseball 23. Part 1 was an introduction to the concept and overall planning needed to successfully create a fictional league, and I also went through the wizard inside the game that you'll use to get things started. In this installment, we'll talk about the files you may or may not want to edit to fully make your league your own. To begin this installment, I want to take a look in OOTP 22 at Figment League Baseball. Now, Figment's a fictional league I created back in OOTP 19 and is now using OOTP 22, having upgraded 3 times with another 4th upgrade coming later this spring when we move to OOTP 23. So here we have the Figment League homepage for Fable, which is the federally aligned baseball leagues, the main league inside Figment. In part 1, I talked about having a game name and a league name, and the game name is Figment League Baseball, but the league name inside of it is the federally aligned baseball leagues, which is my Major League Baseball essentially, and I call it Fable because it's kind of a pun on this being a fictional league, hence Figment as the name and Fable as the baseball league itself. So that's where that comes from. Now, before we get started, I wanted to look at the game's online manual. So here's our online manual, and this is what it talks about, what you can customize, right? So we're in the customizing OOTP section. So here it says OOTP comes with a world database that includes over 80,000 cities in all the nations in the world today. But perhaps you don't want to use the real world for your baseball universe. Perhaps you want to add new cities or play in an entirely fictional universe. Luckily, most of the world database is customizable. Now, that's all true. What's in the second paragraph actually is no longer true. It says OOTP's world database is actually nothing more than 2 text files, nations.txt and cities.txt. That is no longer true and hasn't been true for several versions, but they haven't updated the manual to cover the fact that these are now stored as XML files. So XML, if you're not familiar with it, it stands for Extensible Markup Language, and it's similar to HTML, which some of you probably know what that is, and that's the language on which web pages are built, basically. Modern websites use a lot more than just vanilla HTML, but for simplicity's sake, the foundation of a web page is typically HTML. But XML, unlike HTML, has no predefined tags, and it's open-ended and really, really customizable. Basically, you build your own. So this makes it a good fit for an application like OOTP because it ensures that the data that comes into the game is structured in the exact manner that the game needs it. Luckily, there are some tools that you can use to make the conversion from, say, a comma delimited text file or an Excel spreadsheet or something like that to XML, which can then be imported into OOTP, allowing you to create Middle-earth or, a Star Trek universe or whatever it may be, just something you've completely made up on your own. OOTP offers so much to you in terms of customizability, but there is some work involved in actually getting all that done, and it can be pretty complicated just because there's a lot of moving pieces. The good news is you can go with the default in many areas and not have to feel like you need to edit absolutely everything. So let's take a look at some of these XML files. So I am going to open, this is an XML notepad. And what this will do is allow me to show you kind of the format of what the XML files look like. And then we'll talk about maybe what some of the finished product looks like when I go back and look at Figment. I'll show you what you can do after editing some of this data. This is a free program, by the way. You can download it, just search for XML notepad. Just to kind of give a first look here, if we go into File and go Open, and I have it already pointed to my OOTP 23 database file. So this is where you're going to go. Okay, I have mine on an external drive. I installed OOTP on an external drive, but you have Out of the Park Developments, OOTP Baseball 23 database. That's the path you need to go to get at these files. So depending on your system and your installation, this can be in various places. If you're on a Mac or a Linux setup, I'm on Windows, they'll be a little bit different. As long as you know where your game is installed, you'll be able to locate these files. Okay, so now if I change the file type we're looking for to just be XML, you can see there are 4. Okay, so there are 4 XML files that OOTP uses and that are available for customization. All right, so these are our 4 right here. There's the names.xml, which holds the player names, and this is first name, last name, and nicknames. Okay. The schools.xml file, which, as you probably guess, holds all the high schools, the junior colleges, and the 4-year schools that the game uses when creating amateur players. Or if you were to create like a feeder league, it would also use that for that. The third one is the team nicknames file, and this stores all the nicknames that the game uses when it's creating team names. So if you watched part 1, when I went and created my fictional league with 8 teams, all those teams had nicknames. Those nicknames came out of this this file, essentially. And then the fourth one is certainly, it's last but not least, and it's depending on what you're trying to do, it's either very, very important or you're just going to go with the default and not touch it at all. It's the world_default.xml file. So this is where all the cities, the countries, the states, the provinces are all in here. And it includes their location, their geographic location in terms of latitude and longitude, and it also includes their population. So there is a lot of data in this file. I'm actually going to start with probably the simplest, well, the nicknames is probably the simplest one, but I'm going to start with schools because schools is very simple, and I can show you the application of changes to this file inside my Figment league file. So if we open this up, okay, this is what you get. So this is top level, and it's just telling you that it's version 1 and it's the encoding, and you don't have to worry about that unless you're a programmer. Programmers would know what that means. I know what that means, but you don't have to worry about it. So this gives you also the date and the timestamp of when OOTP itself actually last generated this file. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And this is just our file version, right? So each one of these, and you can see the twister here, the little plus sign. This will open up. If you click on it, it opens it up, and then you can see all the schools. But you can see I'm scrolling down. There are a ton of these in here. So we're just going to open up the first one. All right. So when you look at this in what we would call like a tree view here, these red dots indicate fields, right? So this is the school. This is a school tag. So if we looked at the text itself, it would be inside brackets school, and then you would have attributes. So ID, type, competition level, frequency, latitude and longitude. So the location of the school is also in here, and then you have various IDs. City ID, state ID, nation ID, I believe. I know 206 is the nation ID for the United States of America inside the game. I'm guessing SID is the state ID for Texas, and 1969 is the city ID for Abilene. So this is obviously Abilene Christian University, Wildcats, and so on. So you can see these kind of red colored here. This goes with these. These are fields within the school tag, and then these are sub tags. So let me show you what this looks like in terms of text itself. So this is the text of the file. This is the file we're looking at, and the XML notepad opens it up so that it's a little bit more readable or easily readable. But this is what I was saying, right? So we have our school tag here inside the angled bracket. Here are the tags, right? ID 1, type 1, the competition, the frequency, the latitude and longitude, the city ID, the state ID, the nation ID, right? Then under there we have all other tags, and these should actually be indented, but they're not. In a lot of applications, these would be indented because these are subfields within the school field. So the city tag is Abilene, the state abbreviation tag is TX for Texas. Then we have our school name, the nickname, the association, which is the conference, not the conference, the level. So this is an NCAA Division I school in the Southland Conference. And then we have the Korean kind of translation or Korean text for this, because OOTP itself was purchased by Com2Us, which is a Korean company. So when that happened, they incorporated a lot of Korean text into these text files. If you went back to OOTP 21 before the purchase, you wouldn't have these Korean tags in here. So obviously you can see there are a lot of these, and if you scrolled all the way to the bottom, there are 20,905 schools in here. And again, that includes high schools, junior colleges, and colleges, and it includes things in other countries. Like this is a school in Japan. So they're not just schools in the United States, there are schools in Japan, Korea, and some other places as well, I believe. I haven't actually scanned through everything to see where some of these are, but there are a lot of schools in here, a lot. Now, something to keep in mind when we start talking about editing these things is once you create the league, you can actually change things midstream. So if you're, 10, 11, 12 seasons, whatever it may be, into your league's history, you can actually import updated school information. But what you're going to end up doing is if the numbers don't match up, if you've changed, if Albanian Christian is number 1 in your original file, and then you update it and it's number 4 in your new file, that's going to break the connections inside the game, and you're going to have some really wonky looking data. So ideally what you want to do is make sure that if you're going to add something, you add it at the end, and you don't want to reduce it. So because if you reduce it, then you're going to pull things out and you're going to end up with some broken data, and it's going to be kind of a mess. Ideally, you keep things consistent, and this goes for most things, like the world file as well. Because if you change cities, then city names will change as far as what the players have. So if your player is born in New York City and New York has an ID, and you change the ID for New York City to some other number, then that player's hometown is going to be wrong in the game. So just things to keep in mind as far as what you're editing, okay? So this makes it easy if you wanted to one-off edit something. So if we wanted to change this to be, Dallas or something, you could do that. And again, unless you change the city ID up here as well to whatever number Dallas is, when you save this, these aren't going to match up. So ideally, you don't want to do that. And, if you're going to edit something, you have to make sure you edit all the information, or you're going to have things that look a little crazy inside the game. So typically, when you edit a record, you edit all of its data, okay? If you're going to move the location, you need to edit the city ID, and if applicable, you would also need to edit the state ID and the nation ID if you moved Albanian out of the United States. If you went and you created a Texas Republic for some alternate history thing where Texas never joined the Union, never became part of the United States, it's its own independent country, then in theory, not in theory, in actuality, you would need to change this nation ID from 206, which is the United States, to whatever country name or number rather you created for Texas, the Texas Republic. And it would be, something, probably it would be a higher number because you would tack it onto the end of the other nation's file. So again, there's a lot of kind of organization. That's why I was talking about in part 1, planning and so forth. That applies here as well. You want to make sure you have a good plan and are fully aware of all the possible pitfalls of kind of messing around with this data willy-nilly. You need to be organized to do this in such a way that you're not going to open up OOTP and say, what the heck did I do there? All right, so to see what kind of, this does if you edit it, I'm going to go back to Figment. And if you're not aware of where you look at schools in the game, if you go into the game folder and go to Explore World, there's a schools page here. So these are, and I'm going to sort by my ID number. So as I showed you, there are 20,905 schools in the current OOTP school database. So this is what it looks like when you've edited. I only have 505 schools. Actually, I think these are just colleges. So if I clear my filter, we have, yeah, there's 4,136. So I have a handful of junior colleges, well, more than a handful, but not a ton. A lot of high schools and some colleges. It doesn't really matter what numbers you use. Also, you can see the competition level for these schools is only good as opposed to great. What frequency does is determine how many players come out of that school. So the higher the frequency is, the more guys will be coming into your draft from that school. And obviously lower frequency means they're more rare. And so if you look at like these average schools like Great Plains State, they only have a frequency of 5. Okay, so next we're going to look at the names file. And just to kind of give you an example here of what the names file looked like in previous versions, if I bring this word Notepad++ back in, you can see here that we've got the name and then just basically 2 numbers. And this is a comma delimited file, right? So if you're not familiar with a comma delimited file, if you were to open this up in, say, Excel, and it was saved as a .csv file, so Excel knew it was comma delimited, it would actually be 3 columns here. So you'd have Al in column A, 37 in column B, and 0 in column C. So what do these mean? Okay, so obviously the first column is the name itself, and then the second column is frequency, and the third column is the name set ID, essentially. So each country or nationality or ethnicity, I think it's ethnicity is what OOTP refers to it as, has its own code number. And so I think 39, if I remember correctly, is modern US. So if we went all the way to the bottom, it was 40 here, but if we went to, say, 39, if I can find it. So here's 39, so I believe this is your modern US. And so these are the names that the game sees as American names, essentially. And so you would have the name and then the frequency, 1 being the lowest. So, you know, there's a big chance of getting a Tony here with a 4865 frequency as opposed to a Tory with just a 1, or a Trace with a 1, Tracy 2, so on. Travis is a 794. If you went to something more common like Jim or something, would probably have a high number. And yeah, Jim has 642, Jimmy 136, John 2762, Jordan 7557. See, this is a modern name set, right? So if this were a 1900 name set, John would probably be a much bigger number, and Jordan might be a 1. Because, you know, names have changed. Josh 13080, that's a lot. My name is Joseph, although I go by Joe, and it's a 19. And Joe itself is a 2974, which isn't terribly low, but still lower than it would have been probably 50 years ago or so. So that's how this is the name file in OOTP 22 and previous versions, and this is first name. Last names were a separate file, and nicknames were also a separate file. But I don't have nicknames open, but it works the same way, right? You have the name, the frequency, and the name set. So this is what it was like. It was 3 separate files previous to OOTP 23. In OOTP 23, we have to go back to our XML notepad and open the here, let me just make it simple, right? If we go in here and we go to the names file, which is the biggest file you can see, right? Almost 36 megabytes. So if we open this up, okay, so you can see now, same thing, right? You got your version and your encoding and the date that the file was modified in the file version record. So then you can see first names, last names, nicknames. These are top level tags, okay? So again, looking at it as like a tree, this is your top level. And then if you twist it open, then each one of these ends is a name record. These are our first names, and it works just the same way as we saw in the CSV file, right? So except they've branched it out quite a bit, right? So this is our name ID, and then each one of these is a field. So in N, you'll have a tag N, and then it'll say NID equals quotation marks 23 close quotation marks, and then a closing tag, and then you would have the close of this tag, and then at the bottom of that you'd have a slash closing the end file, but that comes after all of these. So then you'd have, in English, you'd have the English text, the Spanish text, which would be the same in most cases. This is Korean, Japanese, Chinese. So before, where we only had basically one, now we have 5. You have English, Spanish, Korean, Japanese, and Chinese. So you have variations of the name, probably more so because of the different alphabets used in Korea, Japan, and China than any other reason. But then you also have this NL, and what NL is essentially the country that goes with it, and the ethnicity, right? So it's this name AC is in name set 0, language ID, I think is what this is, and distribution is obviously that's the frequency I was referring to when we were looking at the text file. So in name set 0 or language set 0, it has a frequency of 1. In name set 39, which is modern US, it has a distribution of 1 as well. So this is a fairly uncommon name, right? And then all of these records would be like this. You have AJ, you have a high. You can open this in here in Notepad++, and so this is what it looks like, as an actual text file, right? The XML Notepad will parse this so that you get a bunch of N records and you can twist them open. This just lists it out as text, right? So you can scroll all the way down. In here, if we can find it. So here's Smith. Smith's going to have a long one because it's a lot of last name in here too. So you have Smith, English, Spanish, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and then you have the name listing, NL, right? So that's 0, 34, 8, 59, pretty common there. And then you have 2, 5, 6, 8, 10, 16, 18, 20, 28, 32, 33, and 39, which is the US, 52, 80. So based on these numbers, I'm thinking 0 must be the UK or England, being Smith, being a fairly common name there, as well as here in the United States. But we have a much wider variety of names here in the US, obviously. So that would probably be why it's a lower number here. Anyway, as you can see, there are just a ton of names here. Okay, so if we switch over to OOTP 23, this is where we left off in part 1 of the series. So here we have our league creation wizard, step 2 out of 4, right? We have our league name and some major league in the US and no minor league selected. All my cities are here. I named everything club. Here's our abbreviations, right? Now, the next step, we click next step. We come in here, right? We got to pick what year we want. So I want 1888. Nope, sorry, 1881. And you can actually type it, 1881, right? Then I want to adjust my strategy. I don't usually use an inaugural fantasy draft. Our start date, I don't know why it does that. We'll say 70 and 2 for now. So now when I hit next step, right, now we're on step 4. This is where I stopped. I hit finish. Okay, so here we are, 1881. All right. So now you can do some more advanced stuff, right? So we have our settings tab, and I'm going to go through this actually in the third video. This one I just wanted to kind of talk about the editing of things, and so you can actually change some of this stuff once you create the league. Right now, you're kind of somewhat trapped. So you can do things like set up your rules and your financials and your options and all this stuff. And I'm going to go through this in part 3. Okay. For now, I'm just going to kind of accept these changes, and I'm just going to create my game. So I'm going to hit start game, and I'm gonna, you can enter your name in here if you want to be the commissioner, as I do, or whatever, right? I'll just say GM, playing commissioner mode. So now I'm set up, I'm gonna be commissioner. I hit start game. It's gonna go through and it's reading those files amongst other things, and it's pulling in some logos and doing all kinds of stuff. And when it's done, you actually get, here's some tutorials that OOTP has added to this version of the game with some other additional ones, right? We're just going to disable this for now. Okay, so our step now would be, if we come in here under the league and go to league settings, okay, now we're in league settings, we want the database tab, okay? Inside the database tab, you have database tools, all right? And right at the top is where you would import your updated things. So there are two ways you can do this. And obviously, I didn't mention this earlier, and I should have. Before you edit any of these XML files, you want to copy them and back them up somewhere safe. Okay, you can always reinstall the game, and it'll put these files back in there. And anytime you apply a patch, it's going to do that anyway. So always make sure. I create two folders typically, one for my edited files and one for the original files. That way I'm covered if anything strange happens, or if I install a patch and it wipes out all my files and then I need to go in and pull in my custom files again, I still have them. So make sure you put them safe somewhere outside that folder, outside that database folder. Now you can put it wherever you want, it's up to you, but just put it somewhere safe. So make a backup of the original file and then save your custom files somewhere safe. Those are two things that I did not mention and I should have, and I apologize, but make sure you do that. Okay, so after that, now, as I said, there are two ways you can do it, right? You can either set them up as your defaults, and then when you create a new league, it's actually just going to use those. So if you have a custom world file, custom name file, custom injury file, whatever it may be, all those things are editable. You can set them up and have them be the default, or once you've created your league, you can pull in your file through this area, right? You come to the league setup, database, and then come to database tools, and you have your injury database, name and ethnicity, world database, school database. These are the three that we talked about editing. Your names, your schools, aside from the team nicknames, that wasn't mentioned, but that would probably, I believe, go along with your world database, maybe. I don't see that here. I'm not sure about that one. This actually looks exactly the same as it did in 22, except the files are a little different now, right? The names are no longer text files. They're now XML file, one XML file. So, and if you edited that name file, you would want to do this to pull it in. The world default database would be this one. You could re-import the school database if you edited the schools.xml file. There's also storylines. I didn't mention this, but there are other files you can also edit. You can also edit your storylines and your injuries and have those be pulled in as well. So if you have an old-time league and you don't want to have, things that are like Tommy John surgery. Tommy John surgery didn't happen until the 70s, the 1970s. So if you're playing in 1920 and someone has that, that particular injury, it's going to look strange that, oh, so-and-so's out and is going to have Tommy John surgery. You want to change that maybe. Pull it out, put something else in. If you wanted to make, those kinds of injuries, career-ending injuries, you can do that, because the injury file is not only the type of injury, but there are things about the frequency of that injury, the severity of that injury, and so on. You can really craft things to be very era-specific if you wish to. Again, it's all about doing the work. And I didn't really go into the methods of actually editing XML. There are tutorials out there on how to do XML. There are tools out there about, how to translate comma delimited files or Excel files into XML. So basically it's a text file, but because of the fields and everything, you have to make sure that it's formatted correctly. And that's a big, big part of this is, learning how to edit XML. It's not difficult, and there are tools out there, but there's some work involved in setting that up and doing it and working with these files. So again, make sure you have a backup of the original file. So if you screw it up, you can always go back to the original. And then once you've got something that you like and it works, make sure you back that up as well, so that you have it. Those are important things to keep note of as you're trying to do this, editing files for your league. So that will do it for this part of the series. XML is not overly complicated, but it does have to be formatted correctly for the game to use it. So as always, thanks for watching. Please like the video. Please click that bell if you want to be notified. Subscribe to it and spread the word to help grow the channel. Thanks for watching. Have a good day and happy gaming.